So in this series, we are trying to work together to figure out how we rise together in the face of challenges. And we here at CEI want you to know we're here as a resource to you all the time, and especially when you are dealing with things where you need extra support or work with sense making. And our hope today is to learn from each other, to challenge each other, maybe challenge some of our assumptions and habits around how we do or sometimes don't do very well at fostering our own self-care in the workplace, and then also to connect with each other. So to do this in comfort, I want to walk us through a couple of key housekeeping items related to Zoom. I'm sure you are all experts with Zoom, but just so you'll know how we're trying to operate today. We'll keep you muted throughout the talk unless you are in the small groups. Feel free to unmute then. And then if your speakers or facilitators ask you to chime in with comments, please feel free to unmute in those times. Otherwise, the chat box is open for you to use at any time. Feel free to share any ideas and comments and other perspectives in the chat. And that being said, if the chat gets too disruptive for you or too hard to pay attention to, please feel free to shut that. Keep your video camera on if at all possible. It really does add energy to the room and helps us with connecting to you. And we also understand that for some of you, that's just not something you can do today. So thank you for trying to do that if at all possible. And also, if you wouldn't mind checking your the little picture, your box that you're sitting in on the Zoom screen, and rename yourself for how you would like to be addressed in case there are times when your facilitators would like to talk with you personally. And we are recording this. As I said, we're trying to send out our recordings within a couple of weeks after the talks. So that's why we're recording it. And we don't record the small group times. All right, that being said, I'd like to hand this off to your facilitators, Nisha and Chad. They're ready to have a great conversation with you today, and I'll let them say a little bit more about who they are. So Nisha, you'd like to kick us off?
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you so much, Mary, for your support in today's session. Again, as Joyce said, I'm Nisha Wilson. I'm a public health project specialist with the Community Engagement Institute, Wichita State University. I've been with the organization a little over a year now. Facilitating training such as this is one of the many things that I do for public health and supporting our community. And I'll give it to Chad real quick before I take it back, just to introduce yourself.
All right. Thanks, Nisha. Thank you, Joyce and Mary. It's great to be here with you all. I see a lot of familiar names and a lot of names that I don't recognize. And so I'm glad to be here with you all today, this afternoon for our conversation. I work as the Prevention Initiatives Coordinator at Wichita State University's Community Engagement Institute. And I'm also on the Trauma Informed Systems of Care team and the Early Childhood Initiatives team. So I have a lot of interest, a lot of passion about a lot of things. And I'm really excited to be here learning from Nisha and learning from you all, and willing to share a little bit that is helpful for me and hope that it's helpful for you all. And so I'll be quiet now. Nisha, it's back to you.
Thanks, Chad. Okay, so it's Monday, it's after 3 o'clock, and I'm pretty sure that you're about done for the day, mentally that is. So what I'll try to do to shift gears for today's segment is start us off with a mindfulness exercise. So if you can, free yourself of your cell phone, maybe turn it upside down, other windows or emails that you may be working on. If you can just take a moment to minimize those as we take just a few minutes to kick us off with this mindfulness exercise, I think that would help us really stay centered and focused as we talk about fostering self-care for ourselves, but also in our workplace. So Mary, if you don't mind starting the mindfulness exercise, please. One other thing, feel free to turn camera off during this segment if you'd like, and then please come back on once it ends.
A 3-minute guided meditation. Close your eyes and simply become aware of your breathing. to use the breath to bring you into the present moment. Inhaling through the nose and exhaling through the nose. As you inhale, feel cool air coming into the body and nurturing. As you exhale, feel warm air leaving the nostrils, releasing any tension and negative emotion. Feel your feet connecting you to the earth. Feel your shoulders sinking down. And feel your neck elongating. Relax your forehead, your eyes, your jaw, your ears, and relax all the muscles of the neck. Come back to the breath, the coolness on the inhalation, bringing you into the present moment. The exhalation, the warm air leaving, knowing you are safe, relaxed. Let thoughts go by like white, fluffy clouds in a blue sky. Pay your attention back to your breath. Releasing yourself from the past and from the future, fully enjoying this present moment. Feeling yourself cultivating an inner peace, a safe place for you to come. And breathe. And slowly open your eyes and come back to the room.
So when you are all ready, you would please turn your cameras back on. Hopefully that exercise didn't put you to sleep or didn't bore you, but it really allowed permission today to just take that moment, if you haven't had the chance to really just become one with yourself and center yourself and your energy on today as you start your week. So if you can go to the next slide. Okay, in today's work, we're going to talk about making the case for self-care, as this segment is fostering self-care in the workplace. So talking about making the case for self-care, some elements of self-care, what that could look like or feel like. We know that this particular training isn't exhaustive of all the things self-care related, but we felt it appropriate just to hit the highlights on ways that you could exercise self-care for yourselves. And then lastly, strategies for self-care. So any of the materials that we go over today, if you'd like a copy of those, please stay tuned, because we'll have that following this presentation with the slide deck and other resources. So we will be able to share that information after today's training. All right, so jumping into making the case for self-care. In this section, I want to talk to you about, yep, go ahead, Mary. This section here about making that case for self-care. And here is a list, again, of not exhaustive activities about self-care, but it is really important to understand that the definition of self-care is making time for those meaningful moments outside of your work, outside of those stressful situations, just really taking care of yourself. And that's more than just taking that walk in the neighborhood. So we're hopefully going to unpack a little bit about what self-care could look like and feel like for you. The first part of the list here that we'll dive into is the case. So why self-care? Why is that important? It's important because we find it's super important for us to manage our stress, preventing burnout and mitigating compassion fatigue. Oftentimes we can become so devoted and so dedicated to a thing and things around us that we negate ourselves. So we have to really find a way to balance our time, our mental energy, and our space so that we don't become burnout in the things that maybe once gave us joy or excitement. Self-care is a preventive measure. And when we talk about self-care being preventative, it's really not waiting until the thing happens that you incorporate self-care. Oftentimes we have, Zoom meetings that are back to back, or we have, we're working in a remote situation where we have external factors that can compile themselves in our day-to-day and throughout our week, which can build up some stress and angst. So if we can find a way to incorporate a preventative measure, whether that's resetting your calendar to create the 5 or 10 minutes before a meeting to kind of help in that transition so that you can really focus on self. And then also thinking about proactive ways that you can also use self-care as a preventive measure. One of the things you'll hear me talk about throughout today is really giving yourself permission. That's kind of why we started with the exercise that we did today, to give yourself permission for self-care. Oftentimes, again, we get so busy and so wrapped up in things that are either a demand or things that we just have to do because we're the only ones that are able to carry out the tasks, whether it's at home or in our work environment. It's important too to acknowledge systemic forces that create the stress that we undergo. And we all have been impacted in some way by the pandemic. We have all been impacted in some way by systemic racism and politics, et cetera. So we've all been either directly or indirectly in some fashion with some sort of systemic force that's beyond our control. But again, the one thing that we can control and that is ours to own and have control of is our own self-care. Self-care is also important as we look at our overall sense of integrity as it relates to ensuring that we walk our talk. Some of you may be managers or leaders on this call, and you may encourage your direct reports to take a self-care moment or a self-care day. Well, at the same time, make sure that you're being mindful to take those same self-care steps as well. And then making sure that we're just simply walking our talk and practicing what we may preach to others that are around us. Lastly, your well-being is worth thinking about, planning for, and prioritizing. Again, demand on all of our shoulders is there, and I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. So whatever we can do to take charge of self and prioritize ourselves is worth planning for. So this is the first or second, I guess, act of engagement that I asked for you today in the chat. Or you can feel free to come off of mute if you're comfortable in doing so. We'll spend a little bit of time just asking about the times that you are taking care of yourself well. What happens when you're able to take care of yourself well? What does that look like? What does that feel like for you? So I can start by saying myself that whenever I am looking at self-care and I'm doing it well, not just okay, I've had enough with these meetings, I'm going to take a walk up the block. It's what on top of that do I do to dive deeper and give myself the care that it deserves. I see those in the chat. Thanks, Dee. Have more energy and less reactive in the moment. Oh my gosh. Now that's a way to certainly think about preventative self-care as a preventative measure. If you take self-care seriously and you exercise it continually, you're more likely to have that type of outcome that Dee expressed. Marcia says, I'm happier. I feel refreshed and replenished. Yes. Getting enough rest and having a good night's sleep. So hopefully, I know everybody's probably talked about it all weekend, but the daylight savings hour, maybe that made you feel a little bit better, or it could have made your day longer, who knows? Being more peaceful, relaxed mindset. And that is so important to have a relaxed mental state because it gives you capacity for some other other things that you'll need to challenge, and it just kind of gives some good euphoria when you're able to create those pockets of happier mindset. A lot of energy and relaxation. So I take it if we just practice self-care, we would put energy drink companies out of business. We probably wouldn't need so much coffee, right? No, probably speaking over my head on that one. But thank you all for chiming here in the chat. I see a lot of, boy, the world is going to be a happier place if we could just make self-care the thing. I'm have better ability to focus and feel more energized. For me, it's making sure I'm getting in some type of activity or exercise. Diet is key. I like the comment about fruits and veggies. So sidebar here while I have a couple minutes before I transition to the next slide. Regarding the way you eat, you know, it's often you hear you are what you eat. And I'm like, yeah, I love a good burger. Burgers look good. Fries look good. I'm the burger, I'm the fries. Until I had to deal with how that made me feel afterward. And shifting my diet to a healthier, lighter, more nutritious diet, I did notice a change in my mental state, in my physical state. It's really important to think about what you eat too. Self-care looks like having blocks of time where I do not respond to emails or, yes, thank you, Daniel. One of the reasons why I led today's training that way too, on the mindfulness exercise, is to really just say no to work. And I'm not your boss, so don't get in trouble, but just no to work while you're in this session so you can devote that time to self-care. I do the things that I love. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, so hopefully, I guess too, on that point, Olivia, what you eat dictates your mood. So hopefully you're eating something, because if I don't eat, then it's like, okay, the mood is bad. So hopefully when you're eating, I don't know, whatever your favorite snack is, the crew will know Olivia's walking to a good beat today. She's got her favorite snack. Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing in the chat about what self-care, when you're taking care of yourself well, what happens, and what that looks like for you. I appreciate that. So now we've kind of laid the foundation for what self-care should look like and feel like. I'm going to put you in breakout rooms just for a few moments, so we can kind of share ideas outside of the chat. Again, feel free to take care of yourselves in the breakout rooms. It is nice to have your faces available on the camera, but understandable for those. A few folks in the chat put that they're not able to be on camera, totally fine. But we would like some sort of exchange and dialogue. It's going to be about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7, I can't do the math, per room. And be as transparent as you'd like. But what I want to have you discuss in your breakout room is, when you feel stressed, how does that show up for you? And I promise when we come out of that, we're going to help build that out. So we won't leave you in that stressful space. We'll help you to be able to have some tools to build that out. So if you would put us in breakout rooms, Mary, for about, probably 6 or 7 minutes, that'll be good to then bring us back. And then I'll ask for someone to kind of share either in chat or come off mute what the group discussed. So we'll see you back in about 6 minutes. The main room. We'll just wait for everyone to come out of their breakouts. All right, it looks like we have most everyone back. So just a few of you, if you don't mind sharing your experience and some of the things that show up for you whenever you feel stressed. Our group is walkers, some in the AM and longer in the evening, also drinking water and saying no to requests this holiday season. That's a good one, Angela. That demonstrates some balance in self-care. So that's good. Julia says poor sleep. Yeah. Generally, when you're stressed, poor sleep could be a result of that. Any others?
Nisha, we didn't answer the question right. We talked about what we do to relieve stress.
Well, what causes you to take those walks then, and to drink more water and to say no? What are some of the things that speak for you?
Oh, for me, it is, just stress in general, overactivity and saying yes to too much and sitting for too long.
Okay, yep. That is certainly a way it could show up. Daniel says we're not able to prioritize things, not as creative. Everything becomes a crisis. Yes, don't take time to celebrate successes. That is super key. Thanks for pointing that out. When we talk about celebrating successes, sometimes we tend to think it has to be this big thing. For some, it could be accomplishing, 3 out of the 5 things that were on your to-do list, or reprioritizing your to-do list. And it could be that you said no to a thing that you always said yes to because you don't have the capacity to do that, or it doesn't fit what it is that you're looking to achieve. So yes, often, our group found reaction to stress to depend on where the stress was coming from. Yes. More emotional and frustrated. Yes, making less healthy food choices, ruminating, and making poor choices. Certainly true, Kathy. We specified that unmanaged stress brings on irritability, disengagement, mood swings. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And isn't it funny sometimes how we think about stress in our environments? Sometimes we don't realize the thing is causing us to stress out until it's repeated itself so many times. But then there are some things that are just blaring, that are obvious stressors for us. So thank you all for sharing in the chat. Hopefully all have had a chance to kind of reflect and see what others have shared about what stress looks like and how it shows up for them. So now we're going to be able to take everything that we just gathered, take that information, and hopefully help you unpack it. And I am going to now transition over to talking about the elements of self-care. So I skipped your next slide. Q, Mary, I apologize that. But I'm passing now to Chad to talk about the elements of self-care.
Thanks, Nisha. And thank you all for participating in the chat. Really good stuff. Sometimes self-care can seem like, oh yeah, I take care of myself. It can seem dismissible. And sometimes it can feel really overwhelming. It's a big thing. How am I going to take care of myself so that I can manage these things in life better? And I think this next section here on elements of self-care helps, like Nisha said, breaks it down to some manageable bite-sized chunks for us to try to manage our own self-care a little bit better and a little bit more planfully. And so the idea comes from here with the National Institute of Health, and the elements of self-care comes from the idea that wellness is holistic. It's an integration of physical, mental, and spiritual well-being, and kind of overall wellness, fueling the body, engaging the mind, and nurturing the spirit. Sometimes it's hard to really strive for health and hard to strive for that wellness. And so sometimes it can be just as simple as, I'm going to get up and out of bed today, and I'm going to shower and take care of myself and go on about doing the things. Sometimes it can be more those things and a little bit more prevention strategies. And so it does become a lifestyle and a personalized approach to living in a way that allows you to become the best kind of person that can live up to your potentials, can help help you manage circumstances and do the best that you can and that fate will allow. It's interesting in these elements of self-care. There are thought of eight elements of self-care. These four here really highlight some of those that we may have the most direct impact on in our own lives without being controlled or influenced by a lot of other folks. So our physical element of self-care is something that we can go for that walk in the morning. We can go for a walk sometimes in the evening if we're able to do that. If we're not able to go for a walk, then we need to find what are we able to do within our physical abilities to still take care of ourselves. And so physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, these elements, you can read the descriptions on the screen there a little bit more to yourselves, but there are things that can be changed by you to great extent. The other four that are commonly thought of and that were referenced in this National Institute of Health article include social, vocational, financial, and environmental. So those are also elements of self-care that we have an impact on, that we can influence. They all involve somebody else, some other person in a lot of cases. So attention must be given to all of these dimensions. Neglect of any one of them over time can adversely affect the others. They are interrelated, and so an integrated approach to our wellness is a best strategy. They don't have to be equally balanced at all times. And so the time and energy we spend into them can be aimed differently, can be invested differently to try to figure out how can we get to that point of our best personal harmony of wellness. And so that self-care that feels authentic to us. We naturally have our own priorities, approaches, and aspirations, including our own views of about what it means to live life fully. And so it's important for us to consider the ways that we value our life and how we live in our self-care. Next slide, please. All right, so this is going to give you another opportunity here for a few minutes. We're going to go into breakout rooms again for 4 minutes and talk about, respond to this question. One of the 4 elements of self-care, so those 4 that were just on the slide previous, and I'll put them in the chat again while you're talking. Which element feels like it needs the most attention in your life right now? Which of those 4 needs the most attention? Mary, can we go to breakout rooms for 4 minutes? Awesome, thank you. All right, everybody's coming back. Welcome back. Glad you could get back here with us. And so Joyce has shared in the chat the link to the full article from the NIH to learn a little bit more about the 8 different elements in addition to those 4 that we focus on. Is anybody willing to unmute and share some reflection or comments on your discussion or your own element that you noticed needs the most attention right now?
I think for our group, everybody was kind of, it was a consensus that physical was probably the most needed amongst everyone, right. Whether that's better eating habits, getting more exercise, better sleep. Those were all things that seemed like everybody was needing to work on.
Yeah, right. Great. I identify with that fully. Thanks, Mary. All right. Let's go ahead and move on then to the next slide. And Nisha, I'll share it back to you.
Thanks, Chad. So now that we've had a chance to really think about what stresses us out, what ways will be helpful in terms of demonstrating self-care throughout our day, let's just spend a moment to kind of unpack that so you'll have some tools to use in your respective spaces. So if you jump to the next slide. Okay, so this slide here is a bit wordy, but I tried to make it to where it could make sense for you all in terms of cleaning your plate and filling your cup. Again, these are just some things that you can think about. I know that in the chat, we had some that were talking about stressing and crisis situations and how we can be really reactive in a lot of instances. So when you talk about cleaning your plate, it's really taking those stressors, those panic moments, and saying, okay, what of this can I control right now? What needs to wait? Or how can I really set boundaries and protect the space that I'm in that moment? And so when we look at setting those boundaries, we are able to give ourselves that capacity for mindfulness and not being able to make any decisions that are rash or not well thought out. Also, whenever we're trying to de-stress, that working out, that exercising piece that a lot of you here have identified. We talked too, and some others in the chat, about turning off notifications, being able to just say no to certain things, not necessarily just work related. It could be notifications from other apps that you have on your phone. If you find yourself not utilizing your time wisely throughout your day, you feel that you're exhausted and haven't really accomplished a lot. Maybe it's that you have a distraction where you need to turn off some sort of notifications. Planning out your meals to the best of your ability. I know we all lead busy lives here, but if you are able to plan out your meals or even a snack, a healthy option throughout the day, that is a way to help you to de-stress whenever you're likely to encounter some sort of crisis mode. And getting a friend to nudge you when they notice that you're highly stressed. So having that accountability partner in some fashions could be really helpful. Depending upon your workspace, you may have that friend, or if you're working remotely, you may have a Teams chat or other IM functions where someone could help support and just kind of be that bridge for you if there's a little bit of tension that they identify that you're dealing with. In terms of filling your cup, thank you, Daniel, for pointing out the piece about being preventive as we look at self-care, and taking those preventive measures and looking at filling up your cup is back to the whole setting the routines. Whether this is the cup of coffee that you like to have in the morning, maybe giving yourself an extra 5 or 10 minutes to actually enjoy the cup of coffee or tea or your favorite beverage that you use to start your day with. So that you really have that time to kind of center yourselves. Take a moment to really explore what energizes you. Sometimes we get so busy with our day-to-day, we negate what things really give us that spark of excitement. So really take a moment to do that. Reconnect to your purpose. Reflect on your why. Oftentimes we identify our why with the job title that we have, but the why is deeper than that. It's who are we? Who are we designed to be? How are we showing up for yourselves? What is a task or objective that you have in your day that you want to accomplish? Or how do you want to make someone feel at the end of the day by an exchange and communication that you have with that person? Why is it that self-care is important to you? Or why have you been negating self-care? Engage with friends who know nothing about your work. It's really important to just take the moment to not talk about work and projects and all the things that you go through, because sometimes you get to operating in a particular function, you become conditioned, or not really institutionalized, not the best word, but you become conditioned. And sometimes it's good to have some healthier outlets to talk about other things. Also, taking a listen to a podcast or TED Talk could be very fruitful for the mind, whether it's something that's comedic to make you laugh, something that you learn something new, a new skill, a new approach to anything that is exciting for you. It's always pretty cool to listen to a TED Talk or a podcast. And then also take moments to express gratitude. Start with yourself. Talk about some of the things that you have gratitude towards within yourself. Your accomplishments, or things that you have on your to-do, things that you have yet to achieve. Just be thankful in those moments. Oh, you're already ahead of me. Awesome. Thank you for doing that. Unless I'm just lag, it's just I have a great session here. So in the chat, I can see there's a lot of energy and activity about what else should be on that list. And I've got to scroll back up, but just to grab a couple of the thoughts before we transition to the next session, is taking the day off guilt-free. Yes, that is one of the easiest ways to just really take a moment to, well, one of the easiest ways, I'll say, to take off if you have an opportunity to take off guilt-free. Yes, being able to shift and delegate roles and responsibilities to others on the team that can help bridge the gap in some areas could be another way to think about that too. Establish setting sleep times. Yes, if you're able to figure that out, Debbie, please share your regimen. I might have to adjust that, but I'd love to steal that idea if I could. Writing daily post-it notes to yourself. So those of you that can't see the chat, there's a lot of good information. Hopefully, Mary, we can save the chat and be able to capture some of these ideals to share in kind of a debrief. I think that these would be good to help others that may or may not be able to see the chat here. Listening to positive, uplifting music, Christian gospel, etc. Yes, lots of great energy in here. Lots of good ideas. So I appreciate you for sharing all of these. I'm trying to read them. All great information. Working from home, giving yourself permission not to worry about household chores. Oh yes. Rubber stamping, dancing. Yeah, dancing like no one's watching, and laughing. Awesome. Someone's using their phone to their best of their ability, reminds them of their bedtime every night. Pretty neat idea. So yeah, utilize those app functions as they will help you incorporate self-care and whatever works for you. Awesome, thank you. Keep the comments coming. That's very helpful for others that are in the training today. Mary, I'll have you transition to the next slide, please. Okay, so now that we have some strategies for self-care, we want to know, okay, so what am I supposed to do with this? So you've given me all this information, we've shared in breakouts, we've shared in the chat and aloud on what that should look like and feel like. Well, here's just 4 reminders for yourself. So if we had to sum it up, go slow. That seems kind of like an outlier in some senses because we're so busy with everything. A lot of us on the call work in public health. Maybe there's some grant work that we're doing, new contracts, we have new demands, the holidays are coming. And the last thing you want to hear me tell you is go slow. Well, I'm telling you to go slow. It's really important that you do that so that you are attentive to your situation at hand, the situation beginning with you. Where is your mind? Where is your capacity to tackle the idea or the task that has been given to you? But just pace yourself. You're only one person, and always keep that in mind for yourself if no one else tells you that. Take time to clean up your workspace. Some individuals like organized chaos. That's what I'll just say instead of the other C word. Organized chaos. And so if you have a lot of sticky notes everywhere, if that's how it keeps you organized, then I don't know, keep that up for you. But if you're finding that every time you have a meeting or you're looking for something and you can't find the thing until after the call, or you're having to stall situations out until you find the thing, it's probably helpful to clean up that workspace. But then also aesthetically and even with your mind, it helps you to have that clean palette, that organized palette, so that you can channel your thoughts onto the most important things, not for the chaos around you. It'll also help you to avoid any distractions, such as having other to-do lists that will cause you to stress out. So you may want to flip those over or stow those in another area. Cleaning up your technological space. Again, some of us are working remote, some of us in a hybrid situation. So to the best of your ability, keeping your cords together, just keeping your laptop in order, just kind of keeping things neat and organized could help you. And then also setting boundaries with your coworkers. If ever you're involved in a team environment where you need to work on a project or anything together, maybe just figuring out what those boundaries should look like and feel like on who will do what by when. For example, your idle time. So maybe you have a jam-packed schedule, but you've scheduled 15 minutes on your calendar for a do not disturb, just to simply give yourself a chance to eat a snack or just to kind of have 15 minutes of breathe time. And your coworker wants to take that 15 minutes. being okay to set that boundary to say that that is a busy time on your calendar and that you're not able to do that. So just some things that you can think about. And as I identified here at the close of this, that it looks different for all people. So consider what your colleagues need, not saying to be insensitive, but consider what others around you need, but do so with the prioritization of self and what you're at capacity to do. All right, so in terms of asking yourself, how can you look at what you've contributed to the issue at hand? Looking at self-care and what you can and cannot control. Also identifying, where are you willing to compromise in some situations? Where's the give and take to where you're not always the one giving and not always the one taking? So how can you create that balance? What assumptions could you be making? Either assumptions about what self-care should look like or feel like for you, what tweaks that you've made along the way. Are you assuming the other person would be thinking or feeling? Think about, how do you want to show up in a conversation? If you have a conversation that maybe you're really wanting to avoid, but it's a necessary conversation, think about how you want to show up in that space. Oftentimes, when you're stressed, you sometimes will just show up just to say it and just have it said, not really to be understood from where you're coming from in your purest form. So be mindful of how you show up in a conversation. Think about what matters most to you in this situation. What are some other concerns that could arise? And what questions could you ask to learn more about others that you're working with? And then what can you say or establish to find that shared purpose? One other thing that I'll share before we get ready to wrap up here is that it's kind of back to that setting boundaries piece that's really important, and about understanding the needs of others. Now that we're in this hybrid model, or some of us mostly remote, we don't have the in-person feel. So emotions, you can't quite feel them the way you once felt them when you were in the office. So being mindful as we think about others, assumptions, other perspectives, to really take a moment to ask some powerful clarifying questions, or create that space just to check in regularly, whether it's a 15-minute check-in with someone. It doesn't have to be about a particular project or task. It could be just to level set and get on the same page. Those of you that are leaders on the call that have other direct reports, think about having a social hour for your staff. Social hour could be something that is via Zoom. Get creative. It could be an open public space where you can all have a lunch together, or take a walk together if you kind of live in neighboring areas. Also thinking about co-creating your culture. You have to become the change oftentimes. Sometimes change doesn't come to you. So when we think about self-care, you have to co-create the culture that you want to see happen. Sometimes it won't happen instantaneous because we're so focused, we meaning leaders and others that are working on doing a lot of the on the ground work, that can sometimes blind us from what's important. So think about that. And as a leader, you can provide the conditions for your staff to thrive in, but you can't make them do that. So it takes you as an individual to remember to place yourself first and to consider your self-care. All right, so with that, we'll go to the next slide. All right, it looks like we have a few minutes left. I went over my time. I apologize for that. I'll pass it over to you, Chad.
Okay, you're good. And so I am going to ask you to do something that is not something that your boss, I mean, it has to be okay with you. Don't get fired, but if you would be willing and able to stay with us 5 minutes after 4, I'd appreciate it. But I'm going to move into the mindfulness exercise. And then we've got some announcements and closing statements before we go. But go ahead and Mary, move to the next one just for everybody to get a picture of a hurricane. Those of us in Kansas aren't as familiar with hurricanes. We're more familiar with tornadoes, which in the eye of a tornado, it moves around really quickly. It moves and moves and moves. Hurricanes move a little bit more slowly. So we're going to use a hurricane as a metaphor as we go through this meditation exercise or Yeah, and it's called Eye of the Hurricane. So I'm going to turn my camera off while I do this because I don't want anybody seeing me relax. Okay, so if you're willing and able, find a comfortable meditation position, either sitting on a pillow, cushion, the floor, or a chair. Sit tall with your back straight, but your shoulders relaxed. Let them sink to the floor, sink toward the floor. And let your hands rest in your lap or on the table in front of you, open palms facing up, and gently close your eyes. Let's take 3 slow breaths to begin. 1, 2, 3. Become aware of your body sitting here. Notice the sense of contact between your body and the seat beneath you. Notice your feet or legs on the floor. Notice your clothes against your skin. Now let's consider the metaphor of the hurricane. Within the strong, turbulent winds of a hurricane, the eye, the center of the hurricane, is quiet. There's no wind or movement here. For a moment, picture this idea in your mind. Can you visualize the strong, turbulent winds of a hurricane and the inner core that's peaceful and quiet? Let's see if you can become like the center of the hurricane. Your current circumstances, your thoughts, your feelings, and the sensations throughout your body, those can be compared to the winds of the hurricane. Is it possible for you to let go of all of these things for a moment so that you're no longer taking part in them? Like the center of a hurricane is not taking part in the turbulent surrounding winds. Let's do this. Start by focusing on your breath. Simply breathe in and breathe out. Focus inward. Just like the eye is deep within the hurricane, your eye is deep within you. Use your breath to connect to this part of you. Simply breathe in and breathe out. Stay connected to your breath. If anything stressful happens in the moment, such as negative thoughts, unpleasant feelings, annoying sounds, difficult life events, memories, try to look at them as if they are the turbulent wind of the hurricane, whirling around, continually changing, unpredictable in nature. Notice that you are not them. You are the silent center of the hurricane, the part that is peaceful, despite what's happening around you. You are the silent center of the hurricane, at peace. You're not reacting. You're simply observing. Like the wind of the hurricane, these experiences are constantly moving and changing. You, on the other hand, are stable. You are not moving or being carried away by them. As you're breathing, notice how you move more and more toward the center of the hurricane, towards the eye. Pull yourself more towards the eye. Just like the turbulent wind of the hurricane, your thoughts, your feelings, and whatever is happening outside yourself. It's going on still, but you're not a part of it. You're in a safe, peaceful place. Breathing in, breathing out. As you sit here connected to your eye, notice whatever arises. Notice the wind of the hurricane, but do not participate. Stay in the eye. Notice thoughts. Notice feelings. Notice sensations. Continue to watch the ever-changing nature of the world inside and outside you. Watch from a distance with curiosity and without judgment, without reacting to what you see. No matter how intense or bad the hurricane gets, the eye is always centered, calm, and at ease. Even the most turbulent hurricane cannot harm or hurt the eye. The eye is safe. You are safe. It can be difficult to see the eye of the hurricane at times, and sometimes we forget the eye is there. However, it's always there. If we examine it closely enough, even the strongest, darkest hurricane, sooner or later, we'll see the eye centered and constant. Breathe in and out. Now, when you're ready, slowly open your eyes. And we're going to share, if we haven't already, we're going to share the eye of the hurricane in the chat so that you can do that when you have more time, or you can think about it again. But I'm curious if anybody has the time to share, willingness to share, open your mic or put in the chat. What was it like to connect to the eye, to your observing self? How do you feel after just being in the eye? It's a place I'd like to be more often. Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Yeah, it'd be nice to go to the eye, to be there, calming, right? Thanks, Heather. Okay, so not all of us may have resonated with the metaphor of the hurricane. I really like it, and I stumbled upon it, but really like how you could kind of see that you are not a part of the turbulence. You can observe it and have better perspective on how to approach it when you get your thoughts pulled together. Sometimes during meditation, issues that have been suppressed for some time may begin to rise to the surface, where there are things that you might notice that you may have repressed in the past. So it's important to kind of be thinking about those, jot them down. If it's something that you need to talk to somebody about, please do reach out and find that support and use your self-care strategies to heal and be a healthy you. You could also use those things that may be triggered in you when you're in the eye of the storm that try to pull you out into the turbulence. Try to reclaim some of those things to fuel you and help you move back into your peace after you can get through some of those challenging times, challenging situations. So we'll share in the chat, the eye of the hurricane description in the chat. And I think that's all that I have to say about that. Mary, it's back to you.
I think I'll go ahead and take it. Thank you all for being with us. Very sorry that we had to move so quickly. Got very passionate and wanted to acknowledge each and everyone's comments that participated today. So I apologize about that. I'm going to put here in the link how to reach us if there's something else that you wanted to learn or discuss in a separate team setting or get some coaching on. codc@wichita.edu. That's how we can be reached. But following this training series, we'll go ahead and send out an email. Sorry, the sun's right in my face. Send out an email that'll include all the resources that we talked about, including the last exercise, Eye of the Hurricane. So thank you all for being with us. 7 minutes past your time. Appreciate you, Chad, for working with me on this self-care series. I value your support. And thank you, Mary and Joyce. I know Joyce had to jump off, but thank you so much for being a technical support on this workshop. Have a great rest of your Monday and a great week, everyone.
Yes, and thank you. And for those of you who are still on, I will just throw in there that our next session is going to be November 15th at the same time. That's a Monday, and it's going to be over renewing and refreshing your organization's strategic plan. So thank you, Nisha and Chad, for an amazing presentation. And we will see you all next time.